Welcome back to the Virtual Global Leadership Podcast, where we dive into the minds shaping the future of technology and innovation. Today, we are thrilled to have a truly exceptional guest whose journey reads like an adventure novel. Folks, imagine someone who is not only a rock journalist or a private detective in their past life, but also has been the guiding force behind award winning edtech products and now champions at the art of turning complex data into captivating digital experiences. Meet Claire, the Chief of Staff at the Remote Digital Product Innovation Consultancy, TXI. Claire isn't just any executive. She's a trusted advisor, a master orchestrator, and of operations, communications, and large-scale initiatives for a team of over 70 bright minds. Making TXI more effective, sustainable, and transparent isn't just a job description for her. It's a mission. But here's what it gets even more interesting. Claire's superpowers lie in her unique ability to be a sounding board and accomplice for her team, transforming complex challenges into clear, actionable strategies. She is the voice of wisdom that helps TXI navigate the delicate balance of yes and no, ensuring they only take on work that propels them towards their goals. Before her current role in shaping the future of digital product innovation, Claire was at the forefront of content development as the managing director of Think Circa, pushing the boundaries of tech. And if you think that's where the story began, think again. Every chapter of her story adds depth to her expertise in leading with empathy, creativity, and strategic insight. And when she's not revolutionizing the digital world, you might find her captivating literally tens of people with her storytelling in the back of the bus. Listeners, buckle up as we welcome Claire, a true woman in the world of digital innovation, to share her insights, experience. Claire, it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us. How are you?
Thank you, Sagara. After that introduction, I am impressed with myself. I did not expect such a glowing introduction. So thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, welcome, Claire, once again. Claire, I come from India, and then, of course, over the years, I see a lot of job roles and responsibilities getting evolved. Okay, so I would like to understand what does chief of staff mean in its true context, and maybe later you can share about how that role, opens up at TXI. But I just want to get an understanding, so that it helps me.
Yeah. Chief of staff is a very interesting role. It is not the same organization to organization. I like to say that if you ask 10 chiefs of staff what their job is, you will get 15 different answers, right? It is very unique to each individual organization. And so what that means at TXI, where I work, is the chief of staff is accountable for the facilitation of the leadership team and the operating rhythm of the business. I am accountable for internal communication strategy as well as the execution of that strategy. And then very broadly, special projects. So key strategic internal initiatives to move our business forward. Those all fall to my accountability.
Interesting. And what do you see, the future of, let's say, chief of staff? How do you see that transforming to other responsibilities, or any other observations or insights that, you would like to share?
Yeah, chief of staff, I think, will become a more and more important role in organizations as it's embraced. And that's primarily because I think people expect more of their organizations these days. We're moving into a future of work where employees expect quite a lot of their employers. I think justifiably so. They expect a really mutual relationship. There's more and more asked of executives. Folks at an executive level are being asked at small companies and large companies to take stands on political issues, on social issues, environmental issues. They're expected to be thought leaders and have their own presence, as well as running the day-to-day of a business. It's a really broad remit. Like, much is being asked of our leaders in our organizations. And to accomplish that, I think chief of staff is this really essential role to add, because a great chief of staff is extra leverage for all of the executive team. It's additional ears and eyes within the organization. It's an additional voice for thought leadership, like I'm doing right now. It's someone else to be going out into the market and gathering perspectives. And so it's just this extra tool in the executive toolbox, this very flexible, very strategic role with a lot of trust and a lot of empathy. And I think the more that we see organizations, small and large, embrace the chief of staff role as providing that extra leverage, even more opportunities will emerge for folks within these roles to take on some of those accountabilities.
Interesting, interesting. Thank you, Claire, for sharing that perspective. Now, in terms of let's say being able to execute this role, how different it is being a chief of staff in a remote organization versus a chief of staff who is actually at ground and playing that role at an office. So, what's the difference?
I have never been a chief of staff when I've had the luxury of sitting shoulder to shoulder with everyone in my organization. So I'm speaking a bit from from my conversations among other chiefs of staff, right? I think it is mostly similar and a little bit different, and I'll tell you what I mean. The similarity is that a chief of staff must be a great communicator, and by a great communicator, I mostly mean a great listener. Listening is this really essential part of communication that we think about pushing, right? We think about talking. I think about listening just as much. Yes. And so a chief of staff must first and foremost be an excellent listener, an excellent perspective taker and giver. They must be authentic and honest. They must have to build trust really well. And you can do all of those things virtually, remote, just as well as you can do them in person, but it does take time, right? It does take a lot more investment, I think, especially when you think of the trust piece. There's a model that talks about trust really being both cognitive and affective. Cognitive trust is we do the work together, and I trust you to be, I trust you to meet your commitments. I trust you to be reliable. I trust that you'll do what you say. You can build that really easily remote.
Yeah.
But then the affective trust piece, I trust you at a more human emotional level, that is trickier to do remote. And so I'm very fortunate that at TXI, we do try to make really intentional space to gather in person. That gives me some of that perspective. I have I've had a long tenure with TXI. And so over the 7 years that I've been with the organization, I've been able to meet many people. Either I did work shoulder to shoulder with them when we were all co-located, or I've had a chance to meet them over time. But I think that's where the big difference in chiefs of staff who are remote versus all in person comes in, is in that space of affective trust, because lacking that level of trust does make a chief of staff's job much more difficult, because so much of it is based on a chief of staff's ability to influence. We typically do not have direct authority. I have no direct reports. Yeah. I do not own many decisions. I influence other folks, or I help communicate decisions that are made, or gather input for decisions that will be made. Yeah. And trust is so key, right, to accomplishing all of these things in a good organization.
For aspiring chief of staffs, or some do's and don'ts that they can avoid?
Oh gosh, choose your principal in your organization carefully. A chief of staff's principal is the executive they are most tied to. In many organizations, it's really a one-to-one. Maybe each executive has their own chief of staff. I'm very fortunate. The CEO, Mark Rickmeyer at TXI, he's someone who I've worked with now for 7 years in varying capacities. And that relationship is really strong, which makes my job, and frankly, his job, much easier, right? When you have that relationship where you can say, hey, remember that time that we did this other thing? This is going to be the same, right? So we've got shorthand with each other. I know that we have a values alignment. I know we both know how each other communicates. And so that choice of principle I think for a chief of staff is everything. I've certainly spoken to other chiefs of staff who have wound up with really challenging relationships, and that is hard to overcome, right? The job itself of a chief of staff is already challenging enough, right? You must be a great strategic thinker and a really effective operator. You have to be a great communicator. You have to take multiple perspectives, hold a lot of information in your head, much of it confidential, and understand the right way to bring that up. So like that job is already hard enough. If you don't have a great relationship with your principal, hard becomes impossible in my perspective.
Yeah. Thank you, Claire, for bringing that up. So, what key experiences or moments have defined your path to becoming chief of staff at TXI?
Oh gosh. I feel so fortunate to have joined TXI when and how I did. I've done many things in my career that I swore that I would never do. And I think that's a great thing for people to keep in mind as they grow their careers is keep an open mind. So I joined TXI 7 years ago, and I joined as truly the most junior project manager they could have possibly hired. I had never worked in directly project managing custom software projects, which was our focus at the time. And I had never been a consultant. I barely knew during my first interview that it was a consultancy, just to like, give you a sense of my naivete joining this organization. And I'd always said, I don't want to be a consultant because I had in my mind road warriors working 60-hour weeks, never being home, having a terrible work-life balance. And then I came to know TXI, and there are other small consultancies out there that have a similar, they really are values-driven. They're pragmatic and principled, and they do have availability of good work-life balance for their people. And so I was really fortunate to join, and I joined, again, as a very junior project manager, but it gave me the ability to come up as an individual contributor, building that understanding of what the business is built on, right? I was doing client work, so I was very much engaged deeply with our clients, with our teams, with all of our practices, getting to know what it is that makes this business run, what makes it successful. And through time, and because it's a very supportive culture, and I certainly benefited from some really fantastic advocates at the time, moved up from being a project manager to leading the project management practice. I became the director of staffing, which gave me my first glimpse into more of running the business versus working in the business. And then became the chief delivery officer, was my first executive title there. Took that work on at the very interesting moment of February 2020. Right before the whole world changed for us, right before we went from being co-located to remote. And so that already started to give me the first inklings of what chief of staff could be, because I was leading all of our delivery practices. So I was accountable for everything around client engagements, from our hiring, staffing, deal review, risk mitigation, quality assurance, soup to nuts. And so I have this grounding in the work, and was also thinking operationally and organizationally, how do we become a remote company? Do we stay a remote company? What do we do about pay equity? What do we do about organizational design? And so pulling all of these threads through came to be about a year and a half ago now. I started to have conversations with our leadership team about what I saw TXI needing around more focus on internal communication, particularly as a remote company, right? This listening and speaking and tying the threads together becomes even more essential to keep the whole team aligned. And thinking about what we needed as a leadership team and as an executive team to come together and operate really effectively as we started to evolve our company, become more focused on data products, become more focused within Industry 4.0, became more committed to working as a remote organization, et cetera. And seeing those needs that were being picked up very ad hoc, as well as the special projects that I mentioned before that, frankly, I was always raising my hand for because I thought they were really interesting, even though I already had a full plate with my sort of named responsibilities. And at the same moment, I was feeling the push of, we have this rising level of leaders. I had 4 direct reports at the time, the heads of our practices, who are just excellent thinkers, excellent leaders, excellent communicators, all in their own right. And I was feeling more and more like a middle person. Someone would ask me a question and I would go to them and say, what do y'all think? You have the expertise. You know your people best. You know your craft the best. And so the pull of TXI needs these new things around facilitation, communication, special projects, and this new level of leaders rising up that really was ready to be delegated more responsibility to. They were ready to lead in that way. The timing was just right to craft a chief of staff role for the first time at TXI.
Interesting. So, reflecting on your career and TXI's trajectory, how do you perceive the role of empathy in achieving personal and organizational success?
Oh, empathy is everything, right? And I feel like the word gets overused, but if we think about it at its core, empathy is just taking a second to realize that you are not the only person and you do not have the only perspective. It's just that simple. And frankly, that it comes quite a lot from my experiences, even pre-TXI, having worked in education and knowing that I was building products for teachers, for students, for administrators, and I wasn't a teacher, a student, or an administrator. But I mean, this is basic design thinking, right? You take the perspective of your user, you have empathy for your user, for their environment, for their needs. And if I take those foundational skills of design thinking and then apply them to an organization, which is what I'm doing now, is effectively I use design thinking to help the users who are TXI's employee owners, TXI's clients, TXI's community. It's the same set of skills. Having empathy for those people who are your key users, which are your clients and your employees, those are your stakeholders, and having this multi-stakeholder vision of what it means to grow a sustainable business is really important to TXI. And so you have to have empathy for each of these different points of view. What are all of their needs? And then where do we find that right overlap between what TXI would like to do strategically, what the market needs, what our clients value, and then what best supports the communities that we work in. That overlap is so key. And without true empathy for each of your different user groups, you're never going to find the center of that Venn diagram.
Yep. Thank you, Clara. Thank you, Claire, for sharing that. I think we learned the empathy. We mentioned you spoke about listening as one of the most important aspect of, let's say, communication. To be a expressive chief of staff. Any thoughts there?
I missed just a moment of your question. Excuse me.
No problem. So let's say empathy and listening in a way. I don't know. Sometimes I wonder why they are bucketed in the soft skills. They must be the hard skills. But then, are there any hard skills required? Let's say to express in the best possible way as chief of staff.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you that differentiating hard and soft skills in that way is inaccurate, probably gendered in many ways, right? But if you do think of some skills beyond communication, beyond empathy, I think often of data analysis as being so key. A good portion of my job is taking both quantitative and qualitative data and creating knowledge and wisdom from that data. Right. And so that could be anything from employee engagement survey numbers and the qualitative comments that come with it, to looking at our operating plan for the year and running an analysis on where we need to further invest, what's going to be the ROI of certain investments. So data analysis certainly is a key skill. But I do think all of these things blend together. And so often, the biggest skill for chief of staff is learning quickly whatever it is you need to learn because of those buckets of special projects. I'll give you an example. I didn't know anything about changing the capital structure of a business. Okay. But 2 years ago, TXI year and a half ago, TXI became an employee-owned company, something in the US that's called an ESOP, an employee stock ownership
Yeah.
program.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I knew nothing about that, but I know how to learn quickly. So I read up, I talked to experts. Of course, I was working with a team. It wasn't me solo. Our founder and our COO were key players in this work. But that skill of saying, I know nothing about this right now. You'll never know any less than you do then at the beginning.
Yeah.
But I can learn quickly. I mean, it's fundamental to being a consultant in the first place, right? You know this as well.
Yeah.
And so I was able to learn quickly that thing that I needed. Now, will I ever transform a company from to becoming employee owned again? I don't know if it's ever going to be relevant again, but I sure do know about it now because we went through the process. And so now I'm very familiar with all of the different kind of documentation for due diligence and really complex program management that goes with it, and all of how you deal with lawyers and financial advisors and all of those pieces that go along with the very complex work of, completely transforming the capital structure of a business.
Interesting. Interesting. Claire, any advice for someone like me who is learning how to learn? So, what are some of the, some of the few baby steps someone, one can take in order to learn better? Because I see a lot of experience you have in learning how to learn. So, I would like to tap onto that energy and share it with the audience.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Let's talk about this. So, what are some ways? The first thing is reflect on what are some ways that have helped you learn in the past. So, I don't know what is like a challenging thing that you've learned.
I think this podcast has been a wonderful tool for me to learn.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I think let's say the biggest challenge, I'm sure your team would also be sharing this with you. How do we learn in this distracted world where we have all the PCs and the lab mobile phones? So how to focus, and rather I would say sometimes it's more about, okay, we are watching a wonderful content that could be of value, but when the moment of truth comes, that learning never comes up directly in the mind. So maybe your process, maybe these are one or two things, maybe you would have more or maybe different, let's say, strategies or techniques. So would like to use all of those and share with us.
Yeah. This is going to be very different for each individual brain, right? All of our brains process information differently, and we all learn differently. So that's why I recommend starting with reflecting on how any individual learns best. So for me, there are a couple of things that work really well. One is that I learn when I actually do something with another person. So just learning in a vacuum, I think I have the same experience that you just raised, right? I listen to way too many podcasts like this one, and all the information goes into my brain, and
Yeah.
then it just floats around. Maybe it floats out again if it's not used. And so I like to either do something with another person. One of the ways that has helped me the most gain a lot more financial acumen, for example, is not from reading a book or listening to a podcast, but partnering with the CFO that I work with and looking through spreadsheets with him and having him name his thought process as we're looking through, let's say, our annual operating plan, and me asking questions and me playing around with things and him giving me feedback. And so that close partnership in the work has been really valuable to me. Without the practical application, I have a really hard time with learning sticking. And then for me, the other piece, you mentioned at the beginning, my background as a journalist and the fact that I'm a storyteller. I write to learn. And so if I hear something that's really interesting, whether it's on a podcast or whether it's in conversation with someone or I read it, to process that, I write something about it. And these days that takes the form of LinkedIn posts very often, just to say, here's a thing that I read. I found it I was surprised by this fact, or I disagree with this fact, or I've had a similar experience, to build my knowledge in with other people's knowledge in a way that, for me, writing is that creative process. I'm making it practical, right? I'm doing something with it that solidifies it for me.
Mhm.
Other folks, it's going to be very different, right? I work with people who need to draw to think or have it solidified. I know people who need to talk it out. Um, for some folks, reading a book is the right way to do it, but it's all down to what's going to work for your brain, your experience, and those are some of the things that work for me.
So, Claire, how do you communicate to a senior members of your team that you know what, you need to learn this, even if you'll have to communicate that, but what is your process of communicate that, hey, this is the learning
Mm.
that is important for you? So how do you craft that communication?
I think it depends on whether it's something that is like something that is new that we're taking on, or some like building on some existing learning. So I am lucky to work with some very curious and growth oriented people. Very few of them will stray away from, will shy away from learning
Yeah.
new things, and certainly most of them have experience as consultants. So again, like this learning is innate, but there's always going to be something that is new. Frankly, if there's not something that's new, you're not trying hard enough to grow and to innovate.
Yeah.
Um, and so the way that I think about it is why. Like, let's always go back to the why. Why
Yes.
do you need to learn this thing? Is it just, oh, well, lots of people are talking about generative AI. ChatGPT is hot, so you have to learn about ChatGPT. That's
Yeah.
actually not that compelling of a reason. Uh, our clients are feeling this need, like they're getting left behind because there's a lot of conversation about generative AI right now. They're feeling pressure. We need to be able to offer them strong strategic guidance grounded in their own experience. Okay, that's totally different. Now I have a really compelling reason to learn more about generative AI, all forms of AI. What's going to be relevant? What are the starting points? What are the building blocks? So coming back to this why always, executives are strategic thinkers. And so they need to
Yeah.
understand what is the goal before they're going to get convinced to like do any activities.
Interesting, interesting. So, Claire, how do you structure your yes to ensure projects align with TXI's capabilities and strategic direction, maximizing success? So, what is your structure?
Um, I go back to a couple of different processes, and it really depends on what we are talking about at TXI. But I think the one that I am most proud of that I want to share about is how we decide on the clients that we choose to work with. As any
Interesting.
consultancy knows, like your clients are your truest partners, right? That's the lifeblood of the business,
Yes.
and making sure that you have great partnerships, that's the foundation to success always. And we have come up with a system over time that feels very true to what TXI cares the most about, which is we have a very balanced scorecard of different factors that we care a lot about when making sure that we are going to be great partners together with a client. We think obviously about financials. Everyone thinks about financials. This is business, but we think about what are their needs, right? Around technology, around strategy, and can we best serve them? Are we really the ones who are going to be the right fit, or would a partner of ours be someone who has like more expertise in that area or more focus in that area? Um, are they going to be really values aligned with us, or are they again maybe just a better fit for someone else? We think about how well we will be able to deliver the value that they need, because the last thing that anyone wants is to get into a partnership where ultimately, if what they really need is to build something, is to buy something off the shelf. Under no circumstances should you come to a company that is very focused on experience-led custom data products. Like, you should buy something off the shelf that is a much better value for you. And so we always want to make sure that it's to the greatest extent a win-win situation. And so we literally have a scorecard that as new opportunities come along, we fill out the scorecard. As we learn more, we update it and share it with our organization. We are 70 people, and any one of those people can offer an opinion or raise a question. Ultimately, of course, one person decides. We can't have a vote on that. That would be a little bit onerous, but the information is available so that we can make really thoughtful decisions. And I'll say that's resulted in us having really fantastic, long-lived partnerships with our clients. We tend not to churn very quickly on partners. We have a company that we've worked with for 20 plus years now. We have very
Wow.
long-standing clients, really fruitful, evolving relationships because we're thoughtful from the beginning. We gather as much information as we can, and we start small and make sure, check in. This is still a yes for us? Is this still a yes for you? Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. Let's keep going. Let's keep growing. That's the way that we think about it, is that sweet spot of just a win-win situation for us and our partners.
Absolutely. I experienced the TXI's process while planning this podcast. The way we structured it, the kind of conversations we had. Now, something clicked that, hey, I got a first hand experience. That brings me to have a question like, can you share an example of a recent project that epitomizes TXI's approach to experienced data product innovation?
Yes, I would love to. So the one I want to share about that I think will hit on some of the key points is a regulatory product that we just released version 1 of, and we're continuing to work on now and evolve with a Fortune 100 pharma company who's a client of ours, longstanding, great client. And it was really driven by, uh, we noticed that they had this huge treasure trove of data, and the treasure chest was locked. And this was the correspondence between the company and the health authorities that approve new drugs, right? So they go back and forth, they ask questions, and in all of that correspondence was a ton of data waiting to be unlocked. For our client, the data was siloed into like 3 different systems that didn't really talk to each other. All of it was manually updated. It took just so much time, right? Hundreds of hours being spent copying and pasting individual questions. They would pull from emails, they would pull from PDFs, they would pull from Word documents sometimes. So it was taking hundreds of hours of human time. And of course, it was prone to error because it's like humans copying and pasting all of this data. So
Yeah.
the client recognized that there's this huge opportunity, right? Get all of the data into one database with an easy to use search interface, and of course, like powered by AI to take a lot of this manual work out of it, just make it as easy as possible. So we partnered with them, and of course, starting from the very basics, we wanted to really empathize with our users. And so did a lot of research with, those folks who, given that this is like mostly operational efficiency to be gained here, those people who are going to be working directly with us, the regulatory stakeholders and the scientists. And so we did a lot of research with them, using a clickable prototype to understand anything before we like fully built it out. And so through this, we migrated all of these like 3 legacy Oracle databases into one streamlined database and built a much more efficient interface on top of it. And just last month, the first version was released. The first week after go live, the traffic was like several times what it had been on the previous systems. And in the first month, over 300 new entries were made in the database, which like if compared to the hundreds of hours that would be spent previously, like in 1 month, that so much would happen. Obviously, it's a great sign that all of that user research that we did along the way really paid off because people were using the system right away.
Yeah.
So basically, all in all, we help them reduce the time that it takes to get new drug products safely out to market in the hands of people who need them, because we were able to pull together all of this data and make it very easy for humans to find what they needed with the support of an AI tool.
Interesting. Interesting. So, Claire, in this journey, often, major learnings come from challenging times or failures. Okay, so what is a one significant learning that shaped up your journey in the last 7 years? When, let's say, a downtime came in, and how did you bounce back? I think I'm sure there would be a lot to learn from there as well.
Yeah, I love this question because we've we've occasionally done a thing called biggest mistake night at TXI where we
Biggest mistake night.
yes, we used to host
Wow.
an event in
Okay.
Chicago about sharing our biggest mistakes. And we do it internally sometimes as well, just to say, here's a story about a way that I failed. And then, of course, the important part being what you learned, what you'll do
Yeah, of
differently
course.
next time, right? We believe very much in, using the retrospective prime directive, and you're always trying to be blameless and learn for the future. And absolutely, I have, my share of those as well. Um, the one that comes to mind as you ask about it now is a couple of years ago, before my previous role, when I was the chief delivery officer, I was thinking about the organizational structure at TXI and specifically how our practices were grouped and how we thought about the capabilities that we were developing. And I was definitely seeing an emerging need from some of our clients around just more product strategy work was needed. We'd come from a legacy of starting very early at TXI as a strategy consultancy and then had focused more and more on just on building custom software, always with a strategic element, but it had come less to the fore. And I was seeing that emerging again. At the same time that I heard people internally talking about wanting to spend more time doing product strategy work with our clients. So it seemed like there was a match here. The place where I failed, though, was around communicating and managing a change. So I hear that there is a rising need for product strategy. I think, we have a group of folks internally who are focused primarily on project management, but they're also really taking on the work of product often, not necessarily getting recognized as such, but they have some of these skills emerging. Some of them have solid skills already. I see an opportunity to evolve these into two distinct practices, two distinct areas of focus, give people different opportunities for their careers, provide more value for our clients. But I did not spend enough time in advance really talking to the people in that practice to understand their perspective, how they would like that change to happen, what the impacts would be. Those folks who were most affected, I did not spend the time with them that I needed, nor did I spend really enough time to more deeply analyze the business impacts and the business needs that would come behind it. I sort of had a sense that our clients needed it, and I didn't dig that level deeper to get much further evidence. And then I spent too much time thinking about it and then not enough time, talking and doing with others. So though I did make the change, it was a very bumpy road. Lots of people were confused. They were frustrated. They felt left out. And understandably so. They felt left out because I did leave them out of that conversation. Right? And that has really stuck with me because that was very painful for a time as we worked through that change. And as I did talk more to them after the fact. And it's something that sticks with me now when we are thinking about organizational change, always of ensuring that I communicate clearly with those most impacted first, early and often, that change does not take people by surprise. And that, again, going back to that earlier part of our conversation, that I am listening at least as much, if not more, than I am talking in communications. So all of those things, it was a painful lesson to learn from that evolution, but I definitely learned it well, and I've tried to implement those lessons since then.
Hey Claire, you sharing this story with viewers on camera, it really shows a lot about you. It shows how authentic you are and the kind of leadership you have. So thank you for sharing that, Claire.
Thank you.
Um, could you also share a story of a cross-functional project you led that was particularly successful? focusing on the elements that contributed to its success.
Yeah, I think this is one where that happened afterwards, where I learned that lesson
It's like a
very well.
movie. It's like a movie, like it comes, it has its own this thing, and it's like, please go ahead. Yeah.
Absolutely. So this goes back to what I was talking about earlier with the employee-owned company, and I spoke before about the more complicated financial transaction that was involved in that. But of course, there's a big cultural element of change that is this different side of the same coin, which is helping all of our people who are going from being employees to becoming employee owners. And what does it mean practically and in terms of your commitment and connection to become an employee owner, to own a business. Mm-hmm. And so the things that I tried to make sure that happened when we were going through our transition to becoming an ESOP are, first of all, no one was surprised. We talked at multiple points. We're considering doing this. Hey, we got a valuation that makes it make sense. Here's where we are in the process. There were, regular updates to the whole company. There was a visual timeline. I was regularly soliciting questions from, because it was all of us who were really impacted, the employee owners, the future employee owners, to say, what do you want to know about this? I partnered with other experts who are experts in communicating about these transitions to learn from them, so that we would have some visuals that were ready. We would have resources that folks could use on their own, as well as talking to the whole company. Made sure that folks were brought along on every step of that journey, that whatever information we could share, as soon as we could share it, we did. And we even did something that I thought was a really smart idea that I've taken for a few other spins, which is a pre-mortem is what it's called. Do you know a pre-mortem?
No, please go ahead and explain.
So a pre-mortem it's sort of the opposite of a post-mortem, right? Before you do a major change, you gather your team and you say, let's imagine that we have done this change and everything has gone wrong. It was a huge disaster. What happened? And it gives people a chance to share all of these things from all of their perspectives. They say, well, we could fail here, we could fail there, we could mess this up, this could change. What about, this is a key person, what if they leave? This is a key, what if the market changes? All of these different things that could come out. And it does two things. It helps people share their concerns so that they feel heard. They don't feel like they're holding it individually anymore. Right now, okay, all 10 of us know this thing is going to happen, or this thing could happen. And then, of course, it allows you to get ahead of it. Oh, if people misunderstand this key piece, you're right, this will be a failure. We better make sure that we communicate that early and often. Or if this person doesn't go along with it, we know that they are highly influential. So we really want to talk to that person individually. So it gets you ahead of a lot of the change management challenges that could happen in the future. And so I think that left us very well prepared. It's a tool I've come back to a few other times, because there are things that will happen that you can't possibly predict, but you can predict more of them than you think. So it's always a worthwhile exercise before you go through a major change to imagine what would happen if everything fell apart.
Yeah. And also, when you share, after 20 seconds, you realize, okay, what did I just share? Like, is it really going to happen? Even it opens up that, because, and in the group, there are other people who are also listening and sharing, hey, don't worry, this will not happen. At least this will not happen. So I it's like creating a secure atmosphere where people come out and, share. I think that's a wonderful, and that's a wonderful initiative. Thank you there for sharing that. So what do you believe are the key factors driving the future of remote work? I'm sure this is going to excite a lot of audience, like the future of remote work. Where do you see?
Yes. I think remote work is absolutely the future of work, and specifically because of the flexibility that is inherent in doing remote work well. To be clear, I don't believe that remote means you never gather. I don't know of any company that is remote that never gathers in person ever for any reason. I've certainly never heard of them. Have you?
No,
No. Yeah.
they meet at least once in quarter or once in 6 months, but they definitely meet.
Exactly. Exactly. And so I think this to me becomes the best of both worlds for many people. It's not going to work. Nothing works for everyone, right? So we should take that burden off of ourselves. But what I believe is that remote work really it goes hand in hand with what we've seen over especially the last few years as employees expecting more of their employers and putting work in a more distinct place in their lives, that work is not the only thing in their lives, and pushing back against that idea, the hustle culture, rise and grind garbage that a lot of people embrace for a while. And some people still do. And, that's great for them. But for most people, work is a part of life. And I believe that remote work helps many people put work in that right place in their lives, whatever that place is, and then have the rest of their lives. Using myself as an example, mom to two small children. And so I work from home. I'm standing in my attic right now. And last week, I had a very busy week. I had a lot of stuff going on, and my daughter was sick. She had to stay home from school for 2 days. And if I was working in an office and was like forced into an office every day, I would have had to take 2 days off work. I could not have accomplished anything in those 2 days. I would have felt really guilty, either because I would leave my daughter home with someone else, getting someone else sick, or because I wouldn't have been working. And the fact that I work remote meant that I could still have basically every conversation that I needed to have that day, many of them with a 3-year-old sitting on my lap. That was fine because I could still do what I needed to do. And she was coloring and I was, having strategic conversations about the future of our business. And there's no problem there. When you think about the multiple things that folks want from their lives, that is not just whatever they do for a paycheck. They want to have families, whether that's children, whether they have other caregiving responsibilities. They want to take care of their own health. They want the flexibility to go for walks or go to the gym or whatever that looks like for them. They want to travel. Some folks live far from their families, right? They need to travel to be with their families, but they can't take all of that time off work necessarily. So all of the flexibility that it gives to people to make sure that their lives and their work fit together well, that I think is really the driving force. And any organizational design and any company environment and any technology that we have, that's got to be the end goal for me, is how do we give people more power to find the right balance for them of their life and the company they choose to work for and the role that they take there. Remote work enables all of that, to my mind.
Yeah. So, Claire, how do you effectively prioritize and manage the wide range of responsibilities and projects you oversee?
I always go back to the why. Like, it has to be focused on what is our goal? What is TXI's goal? What is my goal within that? Like, how do I contribute best? And the technique that I like most around this it's a really simple statement. It's called even overs. I learned about it from the Ready. And basically it just says there can only be one priority. Priority needs to be singular. And so you can want a lot of things, but what is the one thing that you want even over everything else? And so you really have to think about, it's not that you stop doing everything else and just do that one thing, but if priority A and priority B come into conflict, and priority A is your even over everything else, priority B drops or gets delegated or gets postponed or gets diminished in some way because you've decided that priority A is the thing. And that single-mindedness can be really hard because, of course, I don't stop doing all the other things. I have to do lots of things all day. We all do. We're busy executives. But knowing for sure this is the most important thing that I need to do, even to the exclusion of anything else. Everything else can fall away. This is the one thing. Going back to that reassures me that I'm spending my time in the right way, or that we as an organization are spending our time and spending our efforts in the right way.
Interesting. Thank you, Claire, for sharing that. And what essential advice would you offer someone aspiring to a leadership position in the tech and innovation sector?
Think about if you really want it. And I don't say that to be disparaging. Like there's nothing that's super glorious about being a leader in tech. It gets like valorized, and like being an entrepreneur is the most important thing, or being in tech is the most important thing. No, it's not. It's just a job like any other job. So think about if it's really the life that you want. There are things that are amazing about working in tech. You tend to get a lot of flexibility. You tend to get high salaries. Those things are very valuable. You tend to get to work on really interesting problems. Like one of the reasons I love working for a consultancy is like lots of different interesting problems to solve. That's great. If you want those things, this is one way to get it. You can also wind up getting really hard work, lots of long hours, blurred lines between your work and your life. And sometimes that goes along with a leadership role. So I think that's the thing, is thinking about what you really want, and then is leadership part of that or not? And if it's not, that is 100% fine. And do not listen to all of the hype around, that this is the most important or the most glamorous, or I don't know. If it's not right for your life, it's not the right choice. So I don't have any better advice than that. Just think about what's right for you.
Well, I have one more, follow-up question here. Maybe slightly out of context, but important in this particular, point that you mentioned, because it triggered something. The kind of content that I see on LinkedIn or otherwise on newspapers or digital medium. Okay? There is a lot that is being spoken about leadership positions or leadership roles in organizations. And let's say people in from their early 30s, people from their early 30s to people from the age group of early 50s, somewhere I see all of them are collectively targeting those positions. Now, but what happens, there needs to be a proper, let's say, a middle management in place. There needs to be the frontline management in place. But this is something that I've some of them, somewhere I feel they all are competing for the same positions. So, when you express the last answer, this is something that triggers. I just wanted your perspective and your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I really appreciate that distinction, because I think organizations that don't differentiate between paths to advancement that have to do with becoming a manager and like leading people, versus continuing to do the work and being an expert in your craft, these have to be available in parallel, because they're two different skills, right? To lead people and to lead a business is not the same as being fantastic at your craft, being a great designer, being a great engineer, whatever your role is. And those two things are equally but differently valuable. And so I think that's the key, is that organizations need to provide more opportunities for advancement within core skills and competencies, because the reason why many of those folks are competing for those leadership roles, because that's the way that they can like make more money, and they would like to make more money. Just totally reasonable thing to want. But if there were alternatives, meaningful alternatives, I think that many folks would seek that, because being a people manager is not for everyone, and leading a business is not for everyone. But if it's the only opportunity to get ahead, well, what options are they left with? So I think that's on the businesses.
Yeah. Thank you, Claire, for taking out your valuable time and sharing insights on, your journey, future of chief of staff. Thank you for sharing practical and real examples and references from your current organization, that is TXI. And thank you for being yourself and authentically sharing and addressing all the questions that came your way. Just before we end this conversation, if you have any closing comments for our viewers, and if they were to connect with you, what is the best way to reach out? Feel free to share that.
Yeah, absolutely. Please feel free to reach out and connect if you want to talk about data products or innovation or org design or employee ownership, any of the things that I've just shared about. LinkedIn is the best place to find me. I'm sure you can see right there. You can connect with me, send me a note. I truly love actually having conversations with people from LinkedIn versus just like random follows. So feel free to send me a note. Tell me what you think, and I would love to talk.
Thank you. Thank you once again, Claire. And thank you, viewers, for always joining in and listening to this podcast, learning from insights from peoples across the borders. And I promise to continue this journey where I bring in fantastic global leaders to share their experiences, their real life journeys, and most importantly, their experiential learnings, which I think in is unparalleled. Thank you. Thank you once again.
Thanks so much, everybody.